Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show, Your Decision 2018. Today's topic is campaign finance reform for millionaire candidates. I'm talking about Amendment 75, a proposed amendment to our Colorado Constitution. And my first guest, the former Colorado Speaker of the House, Frank McNulty. Frank, great having you on the show again.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And Amanda Gonzales, you are the head of Colorado Common Cause. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And Natalie Wood, you are a Senior Policy Analyst at the Bell Policy Center. Thank you for joining me again.
My pleasure.
So let's talk about what Amendment 75 does. And Natalie, can I ask you to explain the concept?
Sure. The concept of Amendment 75 is that we don't have campaign contribution limits for self-funded candidates in our state, though we do have them for individuals like you and I who want to give to candidates. And this amendment
How do you know I'm not a millionaire?
Sorry, I didn't mean to assume, but
Yeah, well,
I'll speak for myself.
No,
anyway.
You're speaking for both of us, don't worry.
So basically, if a candidate were to inject $1 million into his or her own race, Amendment 75 would allow other candidates in the race to be able to accept quintuple the current limit in our Constitution.
All right, so if I'm running for governor, the current limits are what? It's like, is it 1,000 or 1,100? What's the number? Do any of you know?
Yeah, it's just over $1,000.
Okay, so if one of my opponents spends $1 million on his or her campaign for governor, then the limit for what people can contribute to my campaign goes up to over $5,000. Amanda, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right, so what do you think this will accomplish? Because if someone is self-funding with millions of dollars, will this really make a difference?
Well, we think that it will make a difference. First of all, we've seen an increased number of self-funded candidates. This year we had two glaring examples in our primary election process. One on the Republican side was Victor Mitchell, who stroked a $5 million check, two checks in the amount of $5 million to fund his campaign. And on the Democratic side, we had a Democratic candidate, Jared Polis, running for governor, who stroked $11 million straight out of the gate. And I suspect at some point here soon, we're going to be up beyond the $20 million threshold of what he spent of his own money to buy this seat. So as one of our proponents said, Greg Brophy, he said, Coloradans want elections, they don't want auctions. And what we're starting to see are these super rich candidates coming in, spending exorbitant amounts of their own money to buy elected office, and we think that that's wrong. That reduces competitiveness, and it takes the ability for normal candidates to go in and compete. Amendment 75 helps to level that playing field.
All right, so Amanda, why is this a bad idea?
So at Colorado Common Cause, we just don't think that the solution to money in politics is more money in politics. That right now, most Coloradans don't have an extra even $1,000 to give to their favorite political candidate, let alone an extra $5,000. So what this is really doing is allowing wealthier people to inject even more money into politics, and it's probably not going to level the playing field.
All right, what other objection would you have, Natalie?
Yeah, well, we at the Bell, in taking a look at this issue, came to some similar conclusions that Common Cause did. When you look at the research nationally, people only really give about $250 when they do give to elections, which is actually what Colorado's limit is currently for state house candidates, as an example. So we agree about, rather than leveling the playing field, some research has shown at the federal level when we lifted limits, for example, it tilted the playing field toward those who can just give anyway. It didn't result in more smaller contributions. It did do that, a little bit of that, but then people who just had more money to give gave more money.
But that's the point, though, and that's what helps level the playing field. When you have a super rich candidate like a Jared Polis, for example, who can write a $20 million check or a series of checks totaling $20 million, his opponents are effectively priced out of the election. So anybody who can go out and raise additional money from their friends and neighbors to help level that playing field will have a better chance of competing against a candidate like that who has virtually unlimited resources. I understand that it's not the preferred outcome, but we can't have super rich candidates buying elections, and there has to be some other reasonable solution. And we think that Amendment 75 is that reasonable solution to help level the playing field and take some of the power out of the hands of these super rich candidates.
So we've had rich candidates in the past who've run, many of whom have not been successful. Bob Beaupre, of course, multimillionaire, did not win his race against John Hickenlooper last time around, or first time around, for that matter, 8 years before that. Of course, Bruce Benson, a multimillionaire who ran for governor, and Bob, of course, was a Republican. Bruce, also Republican. They lost as well. You mentioned Victor Mitchell, a Republican who lost, Jared Polis, a Democrat who won. So I don't know if there's actually a pattern where having the most money necessarily wins. But I guess, Frank, I'd be interested, if you look at how politics has evolved in Colorado and the cost of campaigns has just skyrocketed. Seems to me one of the really big issues is how does a candidate, whether Republican or Democrat, deal with these third-party groups that are spending millions of dollars? So when you have, for example, you mentioned the Polis-Stapleton race, where they both have put in over $1 million, but Jared Polis has put in probably 10 times as much money as Walker Stapleton, and that's just, or at least an order of magnitude difference. On the other hand, he has the Republican Governors Association putting in millions of dollars against him, the Koch brothers potentially millions of dollars against him. It almost seems like, in terms of leveling the playing field, your proposal really deals with it at a very nominal level. And the real issue is, how does anybody, you talk about the average guy or gal running for governor, you're going to have to find a way, if you're running for governor, whether you do it yourself or with rich friends, how do you raise $20 or $30 million to run for governor? I don't see how this even comes close to doing that. It doesn't seem like you're really addressing the problem.
Let's hope that we haven't entered a new era where Colorado's governor's races are a cumulative total of 40 or 50 million.
I think you're already there.
That's a very dangerous place to be.
You're already there.
Amendment 75 contemplates the soft money spends because it also says that if a candidate directs more than $1 million to be raised and spent on his or her behalf on the soft money side, then that counts toward increasing the contribution limits for a candidate to go out and raise money from his or her friends and neighbors. So when you look at the hard money, the contributions that we're suggesting be increased to help offset these super rich candidates out trying to buy office, those are reported. The public sees where that money is coming from. They know if you gave $5,750 to a candidate because that's reported. We think that that's where the campaign finance reform should be focused on increased reporting. But you have to do something about these super rich candidates like Jared Polis going out simply trying to stroke a check and buy a governor's mansion.
So what do you do about, as I mentioned, the PACs, the 501 or the 504s, 507s, whatever, the independent expenditure committees that get checks for 7 or 8 figures from wealthy people not running for office? This doesn't address that at all.
Right. So much of this is outside of the control of what we have to do, what we can do.
So how
our goal with Amendment 75 is to address it in a way that we can through our own campaign finance laws.
What's another way we could address it more effectively? And I'll ask that of each of you. Actually, I'm going to let you think about that because we're over time in this segment. We'll come right back with Frank, Amanda, and Natalie in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
The Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking about proposed Constitutional Amendment 75. All right, so I know you're all eager to respond to, what should we be doing? Natalie, what was your comment?
Well, I was just going to mention some of what the Bell kind of concluded in doing our research on this is that comprehensive reform is an approach that we've had, national experts weigh in on, and in fact, DU had a panel that recommended lots of changes to Colorado's campaign finance rules and regs, and we totally agree that the system's broken and needs fixing. Some of the things they suggested are better disclosure, more transparency, addressing some of these dark money lack of disclosure that we see in our system, and considering public financing. And Denver has a ballot measure that is geared toward that this year as well.
So why not say in Colorado, anybody can contribute, certainly any citizen can contribute any amount of money, no limits on campaign contributions, as long as it's to the candidate. And that way, the candidates get the money. That means they're accountable. It means that the donations are disclosed to the public, so the public knows where money is coming from. And if a candidate runs a negative ad, he or she is held accountable for it, which is not the case with millions of dollars spent on political advertising by these third parties. And in some races today, more money is spent by these third party groups who have no accountability and often minimal disclosure than the campaigns they're trying to influence. Why not do that, Frank?
Well, I think.
Would you be in favor of
I think
that?
It's probably a better question for our friends at Common Cause. I mean, this is one of the things that they've looked at and is up their alley. So
would you be in favor of that?
I would be interested in looking at something like that as part of a comprehensive reform measure. But again, it has to be something that's separated from left and right. And I know that these guys have been looking at it. So.
Well, even if they oppose the idea of unlimited campaign contributions, would you be in favor of that if they're fully disclosed?
No, because it would just drive itself down into a political fight and division where we've been.
What do you mean?
We need to find a way on campaign finance reform, where if we're going to have comprehensive campaign finance reform, for the left and the right to come together to address the issue.
So if the left came,
I don't know that we're in that position right now.
Right, so if the left came to you and said, you know what, we want to return money so that it goes to the candidates as fully disclosed, we would agree to eliminate campaign contribution limits on the basis that they're fully, immediately disclosed, and they go only to the campaigns. Would you support that?
I would fall off my chair first.
Okay, so that's a resounding yes. All right, would you support that, Amanda?
So I think where we all agree is that we need comprehensive reform and that it needs to be a program that all works together. And I think that this amendment doesn't do that. It's one small piece that I don't think is going to work. I think one of the big concerns that I have both about Amendment 75 and about the kind of unlimited giving that you're talking about is quid pro quo corruption, right? Where I say, hey, you're running for office. I have millions of dollars. I really like you. You really like me, wink, wink.
We already have that. So here's where you're wrong. Here's where you're dead wrong, unfortunately, because I'm a huge fan of Common Cause. Because if I have billions of dollars, I'm writing checks for millions of dollars now. That's already happening. So why not make me or encourage me? You can't make me, but in fact, that's another issue. It may be too late. Why not encourage me to write that check directly to the candidate? And so the public can hold that candidate accountable. Because the problem with the reform that groups like Common Cause and particularly groups on the left and Democrats, have been able to enact is that it's corrupted the system. It's made the system worse. Because what you've done, unfortunately, is you've driven money out of campaigns into dark money, into these committees, where multimillionaires and billionaires can write huge checks and have no accountability. You have almost eliminated accountability for us citizens and us voters with your campaign finance reform. And so I'm saying, how do you get that back?
So I don't think the answer is allowing individuals unlimited spending.
But you are, okay, Amanda, you already have unlimited spending. You need to reorient yourself and look at the facts. George Soros can write as big a check as he wants today. The Koch brothers can write as big a check as they want today. You already have unlimited campaign spending. What you've done is you've driven it into groups that don't have to fully disclose it. Before, there were all these third-party groups. If a check were written to a campaign, as it is today, we know about it. Us voters get to find out about it. You've created this abominable system which has driven money away from accountability. You need to own it. You need to admit that this was a bad idea and tell me, how do you correct it so that the system isn't as corrupt as it is today? Frank is peeing in his pants listening to me right now.
I am still sitting in my chair, though.
So tell me, am I wrong? Tell me how I'm wrong about what I just said. Challenge me.
Well, I was promised that I'm not on Jerry Springer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you where you're right, which is that we need comprehensive reform, right? What we're talking about.
I'm not talking about immigration, comprehensive reform. I want to know, am I wrong about how I've described the system that mainly Democrats and mainly the left, not exclusively, but mainly Democrats and the left have created, which by limiting campaign contributions for campaigns, and of course, because of Citizens United, which we can blame Republicans for to some extent, depending on your view of the Supreme Court, and the First Amendment, there is unlimited money going the other way. How do we change that? Or am I wrong? Am I wrong that millions of dollars, literally billions of dollars over the years, am I wrong that they have not been directed away from campaigns? Am I wrong?
Well, I think it's interesting because what we're talking about today is people self-funding their campaigns, where we know exactly where that money comes from.
Yes.
And we can probably have an interesting discussion, but that's not corrupting in the same way that money that comes from outside sources.
I agree. And in fact,
let's not pretend that somebody like Jared Polis doesn't have his own agenda, though, right? You talk about
no, but
wink,
you know
wink, nod, nod.
but you know the money's coming from Jared,
right? But he has his own agenda. He wants 2,000-foot setbacks. He wants universal health care that Coloradans rejected 2 years ago. He has his own personal agenda. So him using $20 million to go in and push his agenda is as dangerous as these other things that you visited about.
No, you're wrong.
You know where the money's coming from.
You know where it's coming from.
But he has his own agenda, though, too.
And he's very public about that agenda. He wants better health care for people, or he wants more protection from oil and gas.
He was for a 2,000-foot setback, but he's against a 2,500-foot setback.
Right,
I mean, I'm largely confused, but he apparently has rectified the two.
You and I know you're easily confused.
That's true.
That's another. All right. We'll be back in a moment with our panel talking about Amendment 75.
There's more of the Aaron Harber Show after this.
We agree the campaign finance system's broken, but putting more money into it with some unclear language in our Constitution isn't the approach we prefer. We prefer a more comprehensive effort. Let's get all the great ideas on the table. I think the redistricting measures that Coloradans will consider this year are a good example of both sides of the aisle, different interests coming together to agree upon language to put on the ballot. So maybe we can look to that as a model, do it for campaign finance.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is our final segment on Amendment 75, although I know all of you are surprised that we are supposed to be talking about Amendment 75. All right, I'm going to add one other thing where I think Frank normally would be in agreement with me, and he's not on this one, which is I'm not for cluttering up the Colorado Constitution. I consider this clutter because I don't think it's going to accomplish anything. I could be wrong, but give me your take, Natalie. I've been talking too much, I was told by my producer during our break.
Thanks for the opportunity, Aaron. I actually agree with you. I think that's one of the issues that we at the Bell raised in our analysis is that voters need to know this will be a constitutional change as our limits are in the Constitution. And there's some language in there that's a bit vague. For example, when does the limit kick in? If a millionaire candidate self-funds in the primary, I don't have clarity on whether or not it would apply in just the primary or if it extends into the general election. There are
let's ask Frank.
cycles at work.
Does it or does it?
It applies the entire way through. Once a candidate strokes $1 million check and tries to buy an election, it applies.
Or for $250,000. The idea is it's cumulative. So once you spend as a candidate $1 million at any point in the election cycle, that triggers it.
If you're in the primary, it triggers it for the candidates in that primary election.
And the general.
And then it also carries through the general election.
If you win the primary.
Because you've already spent that money.
Right.
I mean, it's not like the $11 million that Jared spent previously isn't helping him now.
It's probably not.
Election.
It's probably not helping him now, but that's another. Okay, then let me ask you this for clarification, Frank. So the idea is if I'm a candidate and I spend cumulatively $1 million, it triggers it for all my opponents in the primary. If I win the primary, automatically triggers it for the general. And also in the measures, part of the proposal is if a committee that I'm somehow involved in or I direct, I need a little clarification here because it seems fuzzy. So if a committee spends $1 million and it's a third-party committee that has nothing to do with me and it spends $1 million attacking my opponent and or helping me, that doesn't trigger it.
Yes.
Or does it?
So it would trigger it if you as a candidate have directed money to that effort.
And what does that mean?
Under current law, you can't coordinate expenditures.
Right.
But there's this gray area that some candidates take advantage of where you can direct funds.
How?
By telling a donor to give money to this soft money.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Tell me if
that
this
is legal
applies.
under current law.
Right,
you just can't.
Tell me if this applies.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm running for office, and you are a good friend of mine, and I say, Frank, I want you to set up a PAC or a third-party group or a 501c4 or whatever, 527, to support me. And I'm not a candidate yet, but you and I know I'm going to run for dog catcher or whatever it is. And you hold you create this entity, you hold a fundraiser, and I appear at the fundraiser and say, hey, my best friend, Frank McNulty, is doing this. Please write a check for $25,000 tonight. And then a month later, I declare my candidacy. And you've raised $1 million for me. Does that trigger it or not?
Unfortunately, that wouldn't trigger it because you have to have a candidate in the mix.
Okay.
And that's also one of the triggers
so that's my point.
You just have to have.
All right, that's my point about these kinds of efforts. They're nominal. To me, they're almost meaningless because there are just too many ways around them. They just don't accomplish the goal. Your goal is to level the playing field. And so the question is, really, okay, if gubernatorial campaigns cost $40 million, and this one will probably be that much, how do you allow people to be competitive? Polis is spending more money on this campaign, I would guess, than any other candidate in the history of Colorado. But he's also up against entities spending millions of dollars against him. And I got to tell you, whether it's the Koch brothers spending millions, or whether it's the Republican Governors Association spending millions, or whether it's my friends in the oil and gas industry spending millions of dollars, it's kind of fun to see somebody who can say, hey, I'm going to match you dollar for dollar. You got to admit, Frank, there's kind of a twist to that.
Hey, if I was writing the checks, I wouldn't think it was that much better. I suppose with his blue tennis shoes that we were talking about earlier, he has a different perspective.
Okay, all right. So
you all might have a different definition of fun than I do, because
Frank and I have similar definitions.
I just don't think that when we're talking about injecting much more money, whether that's coming from an individual candidate self-funding or from wealthy people giving to campaigns, I think it's concerning no matter what. And what this amendment is going to do is going to inject more and more money into politics, which I think everyday Coloradans are very concerned about. It doesn't help them. At least if somebody's self-funding, I think we still have problems, but we know where their interests are. We know where the money's coming from. Whereas, you know, Frank talked about reaching out to your neighbors and 5Xing their donations. I'm not sure the neighborhood I live in has that number of people to each give this $5,000 limit.
Frank's neighborhood doesn't either.
Right?
I know where he lives.
If I was going to start comparing with the amount of money that we're talking about, I would have to fill the entire Pepsi Center with people that could all give 5X.
But
right?
you would have the chance. You would have the chance. And right now you don't have the chance. The reason we have to go to the state constitution is because Common Cause put our campaign finance laws in our state constitution. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about cluttering, the very folks who are opposed to Amendment 75 are the ones who are responsible for the situation that we're in now. So we're talking about leveling the playing field. We're talking about increasing competitiveness. We understand that this isn't a silver bullet to go after super rich candidates, but it's a good start.
I think it's a blank. But that's just my opinion. But I would love to see you all get together and do something really serious, because I think Coloradans are concerned about this. And maybe part of the responsibility lies on the Fourth Estate. Maybe we're not doing enough to inform citizens about the real issues, about where candidates stand. And if we did, maybe we're not taking on the attack ads and exposing them as much as we should to voters. And maybe if we did a better job, it would blunt some of the incredible impact that this money has. Of course, we have conflicts of interest because we want your TV ads for the at the same time. So don't forget to buy my show, Frank.
Right, right.
You get the last word, Natalie.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, I would just say I really enjoyed the discussion today, but I think our position is still an opposed one for some of the reasons we talked about. We agree the campaign finance system's broken, but putting more money into it with some unclear language in our Constitution isn't the approach we prefer. We prefer a more comprehensive effort. Let's get all the great ideas on the table. I think the redistricting measures that Coloradans will consider this year are a good example of both sides of the aisle, different interests coming together to agree upon language to put on the ballot. So maybe we can look to that as a model, do it for campaign finance.
All right, you're talking about X and Y?
I am.
Y and Z.
Y and Z.
Or Y and Z,
yeah. That's right. X is another one.
Yeah. What's X? Or I probably shouldn't ask. Final comment, Amanda. I know I've been talking too much.
Yeah, that while I'm excited that there are so many of us that want to see reforms, I don't think that injecting more money into politics, increasing the ability for quid pro quo corruption is a good idea in our state. I want to see everyday Coloradans be able to have a voice in their democracy, and I think that this risks further taking it away.
All right. Frank, I know we're out of time, so too bad. No, go ahead. I'm going to give you the last word.
Yes, on Amendment 75.
All right. I love guests like that. Well, thank you all for being here very much, Natalie, Amanda, and Frank. I'm Aaron Harber. Make sure you watch all of our election programming. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.